Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We would like to extend a very warm welcome to each one of you at the NIICE Global Conclave from the labs of the beautiful Himalayas, where the Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement is located. The think tank was established in the month of February in the year 2016. It undertakes independent research in the field of international relations, foreign policy, security studies, and development. NIICE has 4 research centers: China Studies, Neighborhood Studies, Non-Traditional Security Studies, and Security and Strategic Studies. The institute focuses on 8 research topics: climate change and energy, global governance, sustainable development and smart cities, refugee and migration, China's Belt and Road Initiative, border and transboundary water politics, Indo-Pacific affairs, disaster management, and international economy and development. Previously, NIICE has had the opportunity to host distinguished speakers from all around the globe.
It was a great pleasure inviting me to speak here at NIICE.
It's a real pleasure to be able to speak with all of you.
But thank you anyway, and I certainly admire the work that you're doing.
I'm very happy to be with you all.
NIICE Global Conclave is a flagship event of Nepal Institute of International Cooperation and Engagement. The theme of the 3-day conference is connecting Nepal to the world by bringing leaders, diplomats, business leaders, and scholars from all around the globe. The objective of the conclave is to introduce Nepal to the world and at the same time update the Nepalese policy makers and experts about the fast-changing geopolitics, which will help Nepal reshape its foreign policy and to achieve its national goal. This is session C of the conference, and to chair and moderate this session, it's a real pleasure to have Ms. Sama Thapa here with us. Ms. Sama Thapa is the Associate Editor at AP1 Television and presents a weekly current affairs debate show titled AP Center. She is also a contributing writer for Annapurna Post. Prior to joining AP1 Television, she served as the Senior Assistant Editor at Kantipur Television and hosted several talk shows. Without any further ado, I request the chair to take over.
Thank you so much for that humble introduction. Good afternoon, namaskar, everyone. I'm more than thrilled to be a part of this global conclave. And I think there's a lot of thing going in my screen. I hope that's okay. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I'm very happy to be a part of this conclave organized by Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement, connecting Nepal to the world. I'm joined by fantastic panelists here this afternoon to share their view and insight knowledge. I think this session aims to spotlight Nepal to the world, and also we will be highlighting the fast changing geopolitics, which will help us to re-evaluate our foreign policy. I think with an experience of 200 plus years in dealing with world power, it's high time we should stand, look back and analyze where do we stand today as a nation. And with the ongoing pandemic, the diplomatic challenges will surely rise, not just for Nepal, for rest of the world as well, be it striking a balance among major powers to secure international assistance or other factor. So without any delay, I would like to introduce my fabulous, eminent panelist here for this session. May I have the pleasure of welcoming Ambassador Gyan Acharya, former Foreign Secretary of Nepal and UN Under Secretary General and High Representative for LDC, Ambassador Gyan Acharya. Likewise, I'm also joined by Professor Dr. Anjoo Sharan Upadhyaya from Banaras Hindu University. A great pleasure to invite Professor Upadhyaya as well for this session. And I am also joined by Dr. Dinesh Bhattarai, former Foreign Policy Advisor to PM of Nepal and Permanent Representative to the United Nations. A very warm welcome to our third speaker. And we have Professor Zhang, Shubin, Director, Nepal Studies Center, Hebei University of Economics and Business. I welcome you. And last but not the least, we have Madan Bhattarai, former Secretary of Nepal. I welcome all of you to this enlightening session, connecting Nepal to the world. So to begin with, I would like to request Ambassador Gyan Chandra Acharya to begin his presentation. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you, Samaji, and thank you all the panelists, I think. And let me also begin by thanking NIICE, a very nice word, NICE, for organizing this conclave and including Nepal's foreign policy as part of the issues that the conclave is discussing. I think the Samaji rightly introduced the subject. Nepal has a long history of conducting its independent foreign policy. It is one of the oldest nations in the world. And of course, it has gone through many stages of its in the conduct of international relations. But what is very important, looking at it, the foreign policy from the perspective of Nepal, as well as many countries around the world, is that primary objective, I think, for the foreign policy of any country is to promote its overall national interest. And then, of course, I should say that within the framework of international norms and principles. I think that's a very important objective for everyone. And Nepal has also looked at foreign policy from that perspective. The second point, of course, the foreign policy of any country, I think, is always determined by many factors. The history, as I said, 200 years of history, the geography that we are geostrategically located between the two big powers, China and India now, in the old times between China and of course, Tibet at that time, and then of course the British Empire. And we were also part of the overall, this geographic location that also determined foreign policy. And then the geopolitics, as I said, the politics that comes with the geography, as well as the power component of it, and the status of the country, its internal strength, and then of course the national interest. And I would say, because that is very important, because we live in a very interdependent world. Therefore, the behavior and approaches of your neighbors, as well as those who influence the international system, I think all of these are very important determinants of any country's foreign policy. Therefore, I think when you look at Nepal's foreign policy, these all determinants have played a very important role in setting our foreign policy. And the Constitution of Nepal also provides a very strong framework for promoting and defining what it means by its foreign policy. And like many countries, of course, the fundamental issues are how to really safeguard your sovereignty, territorial integrity, independence. And then, of course, these are very defensive interests, but also the promotional interests are very important. How do you really promote your dignity, promote your national interest, and also ensure that you are a very important contributor, participant in the international system. I think, therefore, when you look at our objective, I think I should say that security, like any country, is very important. A dignity as an independent sovereign nation in the Committee of International Relations, in the international community, is also very important. And then, of course, the prosperity. These are very important issues for us. These basic objectives that we have really defined for ourselves. And then how do you really want to do that? Naturally, through consolidation of our multifaceted bilateral relationship, and then expressing our commitment to the fundamental principles of international order. Now, you all know that we have been making a lot of efforts to really ensure that our relationship remains very productive, very high level, with high level trust and confidence with the neighbors, which is a very important beginning of relationship with any country. And then, of course, we should not, and we would not like to confine ourselves in the neighborhood only, because as I said, we are part of the international community, and then enhancing our relationship with the global community is equally important. And that's why continuous and comprehensive promotion of dynamic relationship with the neighbors, as well as the global community as a whole, especially the major powers, the developed countries around the world, and then of course, multilateral institutions and the global community at large. Now, we, like many countries, I think we also try to ensure that there is also a consolidation of our internal cohesion, consistency, and of course, in promoting our foreign policy. Second, I think in pursuing our long-term interest, we would like to promote, and I think this is one of the also very important issue, trust, confidence, and of course, by thoughtful articulation of our foreign policies, and continuous and comprehensive analysis and engagement of our relationship with the neighbors, but also, as I said, the larger community around the world. And then also enhancing our visibility at the international level to defend, not only to defend, but also to promote our general interest, and then promotion of multilateralism, fundamental principles at the international level. I think these are very important issues for us. I believe that this not only promotes another layer of protection of your sovereignty and independent status at the global level, but also this is a means to promote our larger national interest, because his actions at the global level also help us to deal with the global challenges and also promote our global solidarity. Now, having said all of that, I think it's very important for us to really look at where we stand now. There is often a saying that what you see depends on where you stand. That is very important. We live today in a rapidly changing global scenario, I must say, especially now as the world seems to have entered into a comprehensive contest between the US and China. And we also see the Chinese and the Indian relationship has also gone through a very complicated phase now, especially after the conflict at the border last year. And then, of course, we have also seen that the whole the global challenges, including the COVID-19, but also the climate change related impacts, and then, of course, the very strong, I should say, contest that is going on every issue that we talked about, whether it is a political relationship, whether it is a military relationship around the world, but also on technology, human rights issues, and all of these have now really become very much contested around the world. And that is also something that has also led to the reciprocal tariff wars, sanctions regimes, and technology regime, the challenges to all of that. And these are very important for us to have a better perspective of where we stand and how we should promote our relationship. And the Asia Pacific region, which we also belong to this region, is also being a focal point of this strategic competition around the world. And therefore, I think for countries like us, which have a very limited, I should say, attributes of power, but we have a long history of being independent and being a part of the global community and promoting global peace, stability, as well as the global cooperation, have also important role to play to really bring this the global community towards more peaceful, more stable, and most prosperous order. But this is the challenge that we are going through, like any other country. And of course, the strategic competition, as I said, in the Asia Pacific has a reflection all around the world. And therefore, avoidance of conflict and promoting, I should say, better relationship around the world, in the neighborhood, but also around the world is also part of the, I think, the efforts of every country around the world. Therefore, what should we do in terms of these dynamics that we are going through in terms of the relationship at the regional as well as the global level? I think the consistent and the deep analysis and understanding of the changing dynamics is very important, not only of the region, but beyond as well. And I think the engagement with all to fully understand the implications of the changes around us is also very, very important. Conducting a balanced policy on security perceptions, commitment to promote dignity and enhancement of our economic interests are critical in view of our, as I said, geostrategic location. And then, of course, we should stress, I think this is also very, very important in view of the very much contest that is going on around the world, that our relationships are not mutually exclusive and they are not a zero sum. And we should try to really make the positive sum as the relationship move forward. Multi-layered and diverse engagement is key to the smaller countries, especially which are strategically located, because it increases your freedom of choice and as well as freedoms to maneuver to enhance your fundamental interests. And also, I should say that there is a need to ensure that we engage with all and get due benefit from all the relationship with balanced, constructive, and beneficial engagement with all. I think it is very important here to stress that getting support from all is really important. Avoidance of taking sides and aligning with a single power is, is very important. In order not to be entangled, but of course, deciding the issues on the basis of the merit, and then promotion of the larger national interest would be really critical. We should be doing that also by, stressing the rules-based international order and greater engagement, I should say, of the international community in the international multilateral forum, not only to interact with each other, but also to reinforce the fundamental principles of the conduct of international relationship. So many global issues demand global cooperation of all. Multilateral principles should be our important anchor, and we should also therefore work for promoting them at the global level, whether it is a climate change, pandemic, disarmament, peaceful settlement of disputes, technology regime, global solidarity in favor of the vulnerable countries like us, or many other countries around the world. And I should say, therefore, that I think this is what we should be really making an effort on. And this is where the international community should be looking at. I must say that, this is a time to really engage with all. And the countries like us should not be asked to take a choice, to have, the engagement with all and promotion of global solidarity and collaboration is the message that we should be getting across the board to everyone around the world. And that is something that we should be consistently doing at this particular point of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Acharya, for your insight remarks and a very thoughtful presentation regarding Nepal's foreign policy. I absolutely second with your thought that Nepal's foreign policy is always debated as it's surrounded by two giant neighbors. And at times, I think we also fail to stand for ourselves. We fail to speak for ourselves as well. And there's a lot of hear and say going around, and there are a lot of politically motivated myths regarding our foreign policy. That was very, very insight presentation. I thank you once again. And now I'd like to request Professor Dr. Anjoo Sharan Upadhyaya from Banaras Hindu University to start her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. I thought I would be coming somewhere in the third position. So I was happily, engaging myself with other things. Thank you very much for inviting me to this very, very, I would say, important event. As some of the participants have already mentioned, that maybe it would have been better fun had it been, a real meeting in Kathmandu or elsewhere in Nepal. But my sense for that is that at least we're getting people from all over, and this is a much better compensation for not having anything at all. So first of all, I would also, take an opportunity to thank Dr. Pramod Jaiswal, whom I've known from his student days, and of course to NIICE Nepal, that has risen like anything in the past 4 or 5 years, for inviting me on this platform that focuses on Nepal's foreign policy. And I feel very honored in being asked to talk about Nepali foreign policy, not about India-Nepal relations, but about Nepal's foreign policy. I too will, as Gyan Acharya ji has mentioned, one needs to know where one is coming from. So I would like to start where I come from. Lakhimpur Kheri would probably be familiar to some of you who come from not the hills, but from the Tarai. That's where my childhood, most of my childhood was spent. My Nanihal was in Lakhimpur Kheri. And every summers and winters, we would look forward to our Mamaji's bringing us lots of imported small cars from Dhangari. So for us, Nepal then was a dreamland. We would also hear that, well, if you went to Nepal, you would be able to fly at small money. So India of the 60s and early 70s even was not what India has become today. People from the middle class had salaried incomes, and they weren't very sufficient to take their 3 children on a plane. So this used to excite us. Literally growing up in Banaras Hindu University, because I joined Banaras Hindu University, I teach political science there. I'm a professor of political science there. One literally helped setting up the Center for the Study of Nepal at BHU. The first ever center in India focusing on Nepal, which was initially a part of political science, later on grew up to be an independent center, where I also played my stint as a coordinator for about 8 years. And then I spent 2 years as Indian Council of Cultural Relations India Chair Professor at Tribhuvan University. So yes, I've lived in Nepal and I have tried to soak myself in Nepali culture, in Nepali thinking, and I've tried to look at India-Nepal relations, not just from Delhi, but also from Kathmandu, and not just from Kathmandu, but also from places like Birganj and Viratnagar, and places like Banaras. My work on Nepal's struggle for democracy, role of aid in Nepali development, political parties of Nepal and their participation in the revolution, women in Nepali peace processes, and most of all, the impact of Nepal's domestic initiatives on its foreign policy has been read reasonably widely, I would say. This afternoon, I will talk very briefly about Nepali foreign policy from an Indian perspective. I cannot but say that, yes, however much unbiased one wants to be, but the positionality of the person is defined way beyond their consciousness as they grow up to be, or as they are trained to be academicians. But again, I would emphasize, it doesn't come from Delhi, but it comes from Banaras, that has been and remains probably closer to the hearts of Nepali people. So where do we really start about talking about Nepali foreign policy? I'm reminded of my Guru Bhai and my dear friend, Pradeep Giriji, who has been on record stating that, when asked about how does he view Nepali existence, and this was some 5 or 7 years ago when I was in Nepal, I would begin with his quotation when he said, he was referring to the Panchayat era, and he said that in those days, that is in the days of Panchayat, India was the only window we had to the rest of the world. These days, Nepal is open. And how is Nepal open? It's politically, economically, and socially open. And what actually made it open was, according to him, was the people's movement that marked this shift. And now it is a very well-researched field wherein the liberation movement also brought along with it, I wouldn't say interference, but support from players outside the region. And that, to a large extent, helped Nepal open up. Within Nepal, there are criticisms to that as well, that, there were foreign players that were coming in, they were manipulating Nepal's internal affairs, and they even go to an extent of saying that they changed the nature or the culture of Nepalese politics. But here I would like to take it more positively, where young people from Nepal were not limited to coming to universities in Banaras and Patna and Kolkata, but they were very much welcome to places like Lund or Aarhus or California or New Mexico, where some of them have really grown up to become mature academics, and they have been trained to look at Nepali development from a perspective from where so many of people who were raised in Nepal during the 60s and the 70s were not. So in that sense, Nepal has taken a big leap there. However, during the formation of Nepali foreign policy, it was natural to be inspired by the goals of what was then not exclusively Indian prerogative, but that of South and Southeast Asia, and actually the entire non-aligned movement, and that was of Panchashil. And this goal of Panchashil was, as has already been mentioned, and I would not repeat it here in front of this learned audience, was to a very large extent followed. And partly through this and partly through the earlier relationship that India had with Nepal, there was concluded the treaty, which later on, especially during the 10 years People's War, within quotes, was questioned, the Treaty of Peace and Friendship of 1950, that still forms the bedrock of the special relations that existed between India and Nepal. Besides this, there have been, FDIs, equal mutual treatment of nationals, which has been, to my mind, much broader and more liberal from India's side than from Nepal's. Very understandably so. Nepal is a much smaller country, though it is neither small in terms of its population, nor is it small in terms of its geography, but it is definitely smaller in terms of population that forms the bedrock of the special relations that exist between India and Nepal. And besides this, we find that Nepalese people were probably the very few foreign nationals who participated equally in India's freedom struggle. I'm going back more than 70 years, 75 years ago, but you would not find such examples anywhere else in the world, at least not ready examples, if one conducts research, definitely so. And these were the people who brought the urge to establish Nepal as a democracy way back in 1990s, when the initial efforts, actually the initial efforts were happening in the 1950s or late 40s as well, that brought a real opening of Nepal and connectivity with the world. So there came in waves of efforts to bring in real democracy within Nepal, which was on record, not directly supported, but was emotionally and mentally and intangibly had all the encouragement and approval of India, especially India of Nehru, who was on record stating that, yes, he wanted the world to be a democracy. And that is a point where Nepal has started questioning itself whether Nepal has really been independent for the past 200 years. Why? Because wasn't there an internal colonialism within Nepal? Young people's exposure becoming immense through these efforts in these revolutions, and this is what brought a real opening up of Nepal and the connectivity. However, the working class, we need to look at the entire composition of the population. The working class of Nepal majorly had two destinations. It was either in the Middle East or South Asia, and India, because geographically it is reasonably disproportionate to the rest of its neighbors, used to be a common destination. When we talk about, what is the country that we are talking about here, so many of us have looked upon Nepal, as I mentioned in my introduction, as a very nice, sweet Himalayan country where even with people with smaller budgets could go for a hike or could go for a plane ride, or could probably, if they happen to be in Kathmandu, see those very fancy cars, though they just comprised a very small and a very thin minority of Nepal, is reasonably big, with 30 million people living in Nepal. Terms of geographical area, as I mentioned, it stands at 96th place of 258. Its economy too is kind of thriving and is before the pandemic occurred, it was claimed to be somewhere between 6 to 7, if I'm not mistaken. Sends largest troops to the UN peacekeeping forces, has a very young population, 22 being the average age of Nepal, of a Nepali, India having 27 as an average age, and Japan having 47 as an average, 47 years as an average age of Nepali population. There are new trade routes and new channels of international connections. And there is just, it appears that just, it needs to be unleashed. I was attending Sujeev Sakya's event the other day, and I could hear him talk with so much confidence, who stated that there is just this time to unleash Nepali Vajra. And he hopes that by 2040, it will become, if not more prosperous, at least as prosperous as its northern and as its southern neighbors. Yet we need to remember that, when you're ready to take your flight from Nepal, you're literally moved by seeing so many young faces, mostly boys, because Nepal continues to ban its younger women to travel abroad, with tika on their forehead and being wished all the very best to go and work in at times really, really very, very tough situations. Same is true to an extent of India as well, but in Nepal that tends to be for the common person, average destination. It's a very diverse country, so one needs to be extremely conscious when one talks, in monolithic terms about Nepal, and its richness is probably far diverse as compared to India, getting complicated also because of population plantations. Yes, there are avenues and there are institutions in place. One walks to Tamil and one can't miss but the SARC Secretariat. There is ADB, there is AIB, there is tourism, students, telecoms, roads, railways, what have you, and which is becoming all the more prosperous and kind of, important. The question that one would like to focus in whatever time is left for me this morning to begin with, initial observations, is that I was very impressed when I was watching the video being played. It studies about China, and then it studies, NIICE studies about China, and then it studies about its neighbors. One was wondering if China is not Nepal's neighbor. As one would like to see through the long shot, and China actually wasn't Nepal's neighbor for a very, very long time. It was Tibet that was Nepal's neighbor, and China is just a recent entry there. So when you read your Muna Madans, you actually are reading about Tibet and not about China. And that is, however, that of course is China now. And then how does one, face the northern neighbor, who is, either you call it rise of China or you call it the peaceful development of China. And also, does it cause any uneasiness? You would think that, again, I'm speaking more like an Indian scholar than like a, very well-trained scholar. But no, even within Nepal, one hears a lot of concern about China's growth, Nepal's, getting very close to China. And at times, personally, also one feels that what happens to the celebratory experience that Nepal has about its democracy. So one would definitely like to check that out. And in this context, it has been stated that it's been the hard work and strength of the CPC and the Qin dynasty traditions and the centralized rule there, and the fact that 91 million members are there in the CPC. There is a 100% literacy rate. There is poverty alleviation of 99 million people who've been uplifted from utter poverty. Living in India, we always compare our development with China. So don't worry if I'm kind of showcasing China here for all the achievements that China has made. However, having underscored all these developments, one is also conscious about certain recent developments, and that is, say for instance, President Xi Jinping's becoming a lifelong president, or China's activities in the South China Sea, or if you took it backwards, China's role in Tibetan autonomy and what have you. So one often wonders, would Nepal, getting cozier with China, be happy or be uncomfortable about having somebody as their lifelong president? Probably not. Somebody who would, a country that would only be celebrating one particular political party and claiming that it's so very strong. And would Nepal also be happy with a very centralized rule, what having won its federalism and its autonomy after such a long procrastinated, struggle? So these are some of the points that I would say, make me anxious. They make me anxious because this presence, this enormous presence, as we know, is very much there in this increasing presence of the northern neighbor in Nepal. Would it not be small steps towards those parameters? And this causes uncertainty and uneasiness. And some issues that Nepal had, of course, some of them I wouldn't agree with. And I forgot to do a disclaimer, of course, as you know, I'm an academic, and in India, academics are pretty autonomous people. They don't represent either the government or the diplomatic corps or India's diplomatic position. So, one really at times feels that this uncertain uneasiness is very much felt when, for instance, it comes up to events like the signing of the BRI agreement. Not at the cost of its relations with India, but definitely at the cost of India's irritation. Now, when you come to India, you find that, neighbor, yes, of course, we are neighbors. It's a comparatively an older neighbor. And as I perceive, India has had a continuously enriching relations with Nepal from time immemorial and continues to nourish these connections tangibly as well as culturally. And that is where I feel Nepal needs to, or there is a general need to value the plural, liberal, democratic traditions. Yes, when it comes to performance, for sure, India has had all its, roadblocks and challenges and delays and what have you, which at times makes you feel, that uneasy with that as well. But the value that, for instance, freedom of speech and expression brings, the value that multi-party democracy brings, the value that dissent brings, the value that the freedom of the press brings, are values that would be, we would be perhaps, blinding ourselves if we do not acknowledge them. One is extremely conscious of the fact that, yes, probably 2015 earthquake and its aftermath, not exactly the earthquake, because India was appreciated during the earthquake, with the exception of some ugly reporting that happened then. But then New Delhi came to know about the earthquake faster than perhaps Kathmandu did, and the relief operations that came along with it were commended. However, the aftermath of that was something that was quite, ugly. And then what followed was the blockade from Tarai, which probably swept the entire Nepal towards a wing, wherein they elected a government that was, much cozier with their northern neighbors. So no matter how much we would like to, look upon Nepal as an, a country that wants an equidistance with every other country, but this is something which needs to be kept in mind while establishing relations in the conduct of Nepalese foreign policy, in the conduct of its Panchashil. This is something that, to my mind, needs to be respected, needs to be put in place. So, and there are various issues that can be, highlighted as and when we progress. I'm conscious there are others who are also to make their presentations. So I will wait for my turn if at all it comes during the question answer sessions. And thank you very much for giving me so much time to share my ideas or rumblings or whatever you call them. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Anjoo Upadhyaya from Banaras Hindu University. Thank you for your presentation. I think it was very positive presentation. It gave all of us a beautiful hope and aspiration for all Nepalis who are listening your, we were listening your presentation. And at one point I was very elated to know that once Nepal was dreamland, you gave an instance of Dhangari. It still is a dreamland for so many of us. I think there are a lot of things to be taken into consideration regarding the economy. For that, we might need robust economic diplomacy as well in the days to come. Thank you, Professor Dr. Anjoo. Moving ahead, may I have the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Dinesh Bhattarai, former Foreign Policy Advisor to Prime Minister of Nepal and Permanent Representative to the United Nations. Dr. Dinesh Bhattarai, I would like you to start your presentation. Do we have Dr. Bhattarai? I saw him quite a moment ago.
Let's check.
Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're absolutely audible. Would you mind turning on your camera?
Okay, just. Turning camera on. How do you do this? Okay. Can you? Now?
No, sir. No, you're not visible.
Am I?
Yes, sir. Visible, visible. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you, Samaji, for that kind introduction. And following Professor Anjoo Sharmaji from Banaras Hindu University reminds me of my days in the university in 70s, last century.
Yes.
Feeling nostalgic. Yeah, I thank Dr. Pramod Jaiswal for this invitation. And he asked me to talk about Nepal's relation with Europe and the United States, means America. It will not be possible to cover all countries, but let me try what I can do. As we know, Nepal's home is in Asia between India and China. They are our intimate neighbors and friends in need. At the same time, Nepal's old friends are in Europe and America. Our first diplomatic relation was with the United Kingdom, and then Nepal went to establish diplomatic relation with the United States in 1947, April. I think it was 25th. And then, of course, with independent India in 1947, though we have a very old, ancient relations, civilizational relations with India. And as Nepal started its international journey in 1950, Nepal had diplomatic relations with 4 countries, and 3 of them, 2 of them in Europe, and 1 of them is the United States, the other, of course, India. And then comes China in 1955. Nepal's geostrategic location has largely attracted the attention of the countries far and wide, and that of permanent 5 members of the United Nations Security Council. The lone superpower, the United States, has been our reliable development partner. United Kingdom remains our oldest friend and development partner. Maintaining and strengthening friendly and cooperative relations with them is an important pillar of Nepal's foreign policy. Our engagement with these countries runs through various areas of cooperation, Apart from political, economic, trade, and people-to-people relations of late are emerging as the most dynamic feature in our relations with these countries in Europe and America. Nepal engages with European countries individually and through the European Union. Of course, these relations cover in investment, trade, and as I said, people-to-people relations. Europe and America remain the top tourist contributing countries to Nepal. We work closely at the United Nations. We all work collectively towards the realization of sustainable development goal and in addressing the global challenges like climate change, pandemic, and others. There are a number of mechanisms for engagement, and democracy and human rights bind us together. The population there is a strategic asset and has been of great importance in enhancing bilateral relations, advancing national interest. US assistance has gone a long way in socio-economic transformation of the Nepali society, starting from the eradication of malaria from Tarai. US wants an independent and sovereign Nepal. That reminds me of a statement that ambassador in 50s, Ellsworth Bunker said, the importance of Nepal's independence as a stone in the arc of the world freedom and progress is as necessary and important as any other to help Nepal make its contribution towards the arc of world freedom and progress is reason enough for our assistance. So the United States and the entire international community greatly appreciate and respect Nepal's valuable contribution to global peace and security through its participation under the UN umbrella in peacekeeping. US has provided support for enhancing our Army's professionalism, and they have conducted even joint military exercises. Washington appreciates Nepal's commitment to safeguarding freedom and democracy. These shared benefits in democracy and regional security have allowed our security forces to forge strong bonds of friendship and cooperation. Nepal and the United States signed a Millennium Challenge Corporation Compact in 2017, under which US will provide 500 million in grant to Nepal for improvement of roads, cross-border transmission lines, and 300 kilometers of roads and maintenance work in Nepal for a period of 5 years. I believe it is in our interest to be able to sell our surplus energy to third countries and earn revenue. MCC is the largest ever bilateral grant agreement between Nepal and the United States. The grant came to Nepal because Nepal improved its governance, improved its human rights record, improved its social indicators. 16 out of 20. Let us not forget that we were selected through the competition because of the then government's high commitment for democratic framework for governance. Indo-Pacific strategy is what I read is said to counter the China-centric view of the global order. If I understand, Indo-Pacific has two oceans, Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean. It is too large and vague to provide the basis for a strategy. China is also a part of the Indo-Pacific geographically. What America has said that it wants a free, open, and inclusive region. Some in foreign policy circle or political circle see MCC as a counter to Belt and Road Initiative. MCC came much before the BRI was even conceived in 2013. We want to have more connectivity, more infrastructure for our development. Whatever components in both MCC and BRI we find in conformity with our national interest, we take them. And if they are not fully aligned with our priorities, we decide accordingly. Nepal is not aligned to any country. We make our own decision. We exercise independence of opinion and action on every issue. There is no question of taking any sides. Nepal judges every issue on its merit without fear or favor, and then forms its national position. This is what our position should be. We do not want any power rivalries in our territory. We believe in real politics for pragmatic and practical reasons. It is this policy that we followed in the past, even during the high days of Cold War, and took help from all sides and continued our independence of action and judgment. For both of our neighbors and the USA and Europe, given its strategic location, Nepal is emerging as a geopolitical necessity. I think, let me refer to the 3 important events last week in Europe that have bearings in this part of Asia. US President Joe Biden attended G7 summit in England, had NATO meeting in Brussels, and summit meeting in Geneva. All 3 meetings are important, not only for them, but also for countries like Nepal. The first 2 meetings focused on the rise of China and its human rights records and peace in the Taiwan Strait. As we see, China has angrily reacted to it. And then in Geneva, the President Biden of the USA and President Putin of the Russian Federation had summit meeting which was described as constructive. It is my understanding that the US wants to interact with Russia quite firmly, but pragmatically in seeking closer ties in the face of a rising China. I think lastly, we have to be clear that the rise of China is unstoppable. We have to manage it. No containment or no counter. We have to work with China. As we see, within the space of few decades, China has made dramatic progress. When China started its economic reforms and opening process in 1980, China's share of global GDP was just 1.59%. Now, if we see at the World Bank statistics, they suggest that Chinese GDP accounts over 17%, over 16% of the global GDP. I think this is a reality. China is expanding its diplomatic, economic, and military footprints. China has its assertive and in some of the writings also refer to aggressive foreign policy. So I think we all have to work to accept the reality and make room for powers, like it is in the nature of every power, whether it is China or the United States, to maintain supremacy, to be number one. But for a country like Nepal that is very sensitively located between two rising powers, we have to be very watchful. We have to be mindful. We have to watch the developments very closely, critically, carefully, and comprehensively. And then Nepal has to make its own decisions and protect its historic independence. I think I will stop here. If there are any questions, I will come back. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dinesh Bhattarai, former Foreign Policy Advisor to Prime Minister of Nepal. Thank you for your very, very insightful presentation. I think with no colonial history, Nepal has very unique diplomatic history in South Asia, I guess. And we have a very proud history of celebrating more than 200 years of diplomatic relation with the UK and several other nations. For a nation with a strong history like this, at times, our economic instability has troubled our diplomatic diligence. I somehow feel that way at times as a citizen of Nepal. So it's high time to reevaluate our foreign policy for the economic benefit of the nation. I would like to welcome now Professor Zhang Shubin. I beg your pardon if I mispronounce your name, Professor Zhang Shubin, Director, Nepal Study Center, Hebei University of Economics and Business. Now I'd like to request Professor Zhang Shubin for the presentation.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Sama Thapa. Is my pronunciation correct or not?
Yes,
my name is Zhang Shubin is my name. Yeah. Thanks a lot for Dr. Pramod Jaswal and the Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement for organizing such a large-scale online conference. Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, Ambassador Acharya, Ambassador Dr. Dinesh Bhattarai, Ambassador Madan Kumar Bhattarai, and Professor Dr. Anjoo Sharan Upadhyaya. Am I right? Okay, it's so nice to meet you here online once again. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Now, it is my great pleasure and honor to be here to share my opinion about Nepal's foreign policy. My topic today is pro-Nepal is the best policy. But before begin my presentation, I would like to say something about just now what Professor Anjoo Sharan Upadhyaya mentioned about that China and Nepal were not neighbors because Tibet was not a part of China until 1950s. Here, I'd like to provide the historical fact. The fact is that Tibet had become a part of China in the year 1271 during the Yuan dynasty. That is 750 years ago. It was also during the Yuan dynasty that the famous Nepali architect Nico, he went to China to build the White Stupa Temple in Beijing in the year 1457. As it is well known that Sikkim was annexed by India only in the year 1975, that is only 46 years ago. So this is the historical fact. So therefore, it is not correct to say that China and Nepal were not neighbors because Tibet was not a part of China until 1950s. Now, let's get on business. As the birthplace of Lord Buddha Shakyamuni, Nepal is a country which does not lack wisdom. Okay? With a wise foreign policy, Nepal should already long ago have been a stable and prosperous country. As for Nepal's foreign policy, my suggestion is no pro-India, no pro-China, no pro-Western countries, just pro-Nepal. Sandwiched by China and Nepal, China and India, Nepal enjoys an important geopolitical status in the international relationship. China, India, the United States, Japan, Korea, as well as the European countries are all supporting Nepal in its development. But until now, Nepal has just has just graduated from the LDC, the least developed countries in the world. Now, what matters most is that Nepal should formulate a wise foreign policy to make itself a platform for win-win cooperation rather than a battleground for world powers geopolitical competition. First, never play India card or play China card. It is wise for modern Nepal's unifier, King Prithvi Narayan Shah, to consider Nepal as a yam between two stones, and suggested that Nepal should forever maintain a good friendship with both China and India. Now here, I would like to cite what he wrote in the book Upadhyaya. I don't know how to pronounce it. Okay, his book. When he talked about external relations, he wrote like this: whereas this state, that is Nepal, is like a yam or a gourd between two stones. Keep strong friendship with the Emperor of China. Now, let me mention it once again here. Now, when King Prithvi Narayan Shah wrote his book many years ago, more than 300 years ago, he mentioned to keep strong friendship with Emperor of China. One has to maintain friendship with the Emperor of the Sea, that is the English Empire in the south. But he is very clever. He is occupying Hindustan. He is eyeing the plain area that is of Nepal also. When Hindustani, that is Indian people, will woke up, that is to say not tolerate the British, he may find it difficulty to stay there. He might have been searching a safe port, and there is a very possibility that he may come here at any time. Therefore, we have to find out our weak points, and we also have to change them into the strong forts. We have to create obstacles on the way they try to enter into Nepal. Mind it, they may arrive here anytime. That is on the page 9 of the former king, Prithvi Narayan King's the royal palace. So it is very wise for the former kings and the former leaders of Nepal to keep the equals between China and Nepal. In this way, Nepal can benefit a lot, not only from Nepal, not only from India, but also from China. Okay. Second, pro-India is a must for all political leaders of Nepal. A true friend would never coerce any country to do anything that is against its own national interests. Nepal should make a rule that all the foreign aids can never harm its own sovereignty and have to be in accordance with Nepal's national interests. Now, to judge foreign aid is harmful or not, now it is up to the Nepal political leaders and Nepal people to decide. Now, if you think it is good for Nepal, okay, accept it. If it is not, okay, please reject it. Now, thirdly, I'd like to share my understanding about the so-called MCC. Okay. Now, just as the former Prime Minister Kumar led task group report, the following three major points of MCC must be amended. Number one, MCC is higher over Nepal's domestic laws. Number two, the MCC projects have to get India's approval before they start to build. Number three, the audit of the MCC projects can only be carried out by the American agencies, and the Nepal cannot audit any of the MCC projects. But Nepal has to invest 150 million US dollars for all these MCC funded projects. So also, I think MCC should also make a public announcement that is, MCC is not a part of Indo-Pacific strategy. It is only economic projects. Therefore, all those who support MCC to be ratified without amendments, I should say that they are not true patriots to the Nepali people. They are not loving the Nepal country. They are loving their own interests. And we have to do something to make the MCC can only serve Nepal and never harm Nepal. Of course, as well as cannot harm China, because the American diplomats and the Indo-Pacific strategy reports issued by the State Council and the State Department and the Defense Department of United States, they clearly say that MCC is a crucial part of Indo-Pacific strategy, and Nepal is an important partner of Indo-Pacific strategy to contain China. If the MCC is approved without any amendments, it will greatly harm Nepal's sovereignty and territorial integrity. And also, because MCC is a part of Indo-Pacific strategy against China, China will have to oppose MCC as it is now. Therefore, MCC must be first amended and then to be ratified in the House of Representatives. We sincerely hope Nepal can develop as soon as possible, but the short eyesight decision will harm the national interests in the long term. As far as we know, most foreign aid projects are often given an over high price. That is why MCC projects won't allow Nepal to audit. They say they will invest, they will grant Nepal 500 million US dollars for the MCC projects, but actually, probably not so much. On the part of China, China each year provides cash grant to Nepal. The exact number I cannot remember. Maybe more than 300 million renminbi yuan each year. Okay, that is the difference between true aid and looting in the name of aid. Now, let me tell you the history of China. In China before 1949, before the People's Republic of China was founded, especially before 1911 revolution, that is the Republic of China was founded. Okay, the Western powers, they competed to do such looting in the name of so-called aid. They forced the then Chinese government to borrow money from their country's banks. That is the history. We have suffered a lot from the Westerners in imperialist countries. So in conclusion, China is always ready to help Nepal in its stability and development. And we hope all the other countries who really want to help Nepal can cooperate with each other in the process of aiding Nepal. We can never make Nepal a battleground for geopolitical competition. Let's join hands to help Nepal to become the Asia's Switzerland, to make Kathmandu the South Asia's Brussels, because Kathmandu is the place where the secret located. So that is what I would like to say, to share here. Okay, thank you so much. If there's anything I said was wrong, okay, please correct what I said. Thank you so much. Dhanyabad.
Thank you, Professor Zhang Shubin, for your presentation. I can see a lot of questions already raising for you. We'll take those questions in a moment. Thank you for your presentation. And there's a very beautiful takeaway from his presentation. No pro-India, no pro-China, no pro-European nation, no pro-United States, just pro-Nepal policy. I think this sums it all. We should cherish the joyous economic journey of our both neighbors. We should acknowledge and appreciate the fact that we have great neighbors, but that shouldn't be a burden or a bargaining card for us as a nation. Now, moving ahead, may I have the pleasure of inviting our last speaker, last but not the least. We have Madan Bhattarai, former Secretary of Nepal, as a speaker for this session. Over to you, Madan Bhattarai.
Thank you very much. My internet is out already, so I'm using my handset, so please bear the inconvenience. Dear Sama Thapa ji, dear Dr. Professor Jaiswal ji, other organizers, distinguished friends and esteemed scholars, both from India and China, and two colleagues, long-time colleagues from the Foreign Service. Namaskar, namaskar, konnichiwa for Japanese viewers, and good afternoon. I thank the organizers for kindly inviting me to share my thoughts on more cozy area of Nepal-Japan relations, as I take it as a proud privilege as the immediate past ambassador to Japan. Taking time into consideration, I am making my presentation in 6 different segments. The first is historical background of Japanese monarchy. Japanese monarchy, the longest unbroken hereditary monarchy in the world, dating back to 660 BC. It was direct lineage to Amaterasu, the sun goddess. The Holy Grand Issue Shrine in Mie Prefecture in Japan depicts this fact. The first emperor of Japan, His Majesty Jimmu, is considered as the great grandson of Ninigi. Ninigi is the grandson of sun goddess Amaterasu, who is said to have deputed him to earth in Japan to help plant rice, a stable diet in both Nepal and Japan. Buddhism took root in Japan, both in the form of religion and way of life. The ensuing period is taken as golden era of Buddhism, as so many world famous Buddhist temples were constructed. The 8th century saw a very rare event in the history of any country. The 45th emperor, His Majesty Sumu, after a long rule, decided to abdicate and become a devout monk, taking cue from the teachings of Lord Buddha. In connection with Japanese monarchy, mentions to be made of Meiji Restoration, 1868. When 122nd Emperor Meiji took over and started modernizing, The best secret of success was Emperor Meiji's emphasis on fusion of Japanese tradition and Western modernity. The second segment is bilateral relations. In 1899, Buddhist Jain monk Reverend Ikai Kawaguchi visited Nepal, and in 3 subsequent visits helped the 2 countries come together. The culmination of first contact led to dispatch of 8 Nepali students to Japan in 1902, and they returned after completing their education in 1905. Taken as prince students or state students with handsome allowances and 17 servants, they not only injected modernism in Nepal, but also brought flowers and fruits like persimmon, chestnut, chrysanthemum, and wisteria for cultivation in Nepal. That Nepal-Japan relations have strong foundations on culture, tourism, academics, and people-to-people exchange are proved by the way we formalized diplomatic relations in 1956, so soon after maiden achievement made by Japanese expedition to scale Mount Manaslu. This success and unprecedented degree of welcome accorded to expedition members by King Mahendra and Prime Minister Tangaprasad Acharya were duly reciprocated by Emperor Showa. The emperor took it as a great morale booster for his country after prolonged setbacks and humiliations during and after the Second World War. Nepal and Japan enjoy excellent relations. Japan continued to remain one of our toughest partners in social and economic development. An eloquent indication of excellent ties of friendship and mature understanding was possibly the best and only statement in favor of Nepal's successful exercise in constitution making, issued in the name of Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida on September 18, 2015, 2 days before the actual promulgation of the document. The third segment is personal impressions and associations. As a journalist for a short stint with the Rising Nepal, only English broadsheet daily of the time, I had the occasion to make a reporting on imperial visits and close encounters or interviews with at least 3 celebrities. They included Junko Tabei, first woman to climb Mount Sagarmatha and also scale 7 summits. The second was Prime Minister Ryutaru Hashimoto, one of our closest friends who was in Nepal for a record number of 33 times. A first-rate photographer, Hashimoto, may be taken as a pioneer of modern phase of Nepal-Japan relations. The third and the last was Iichiro Hatoyama, Minister for Foreign Affairs, who made an official visit to Nepal in 1977. My tributes to all these great souls who are no more now. I had never realized that time that I was going to represent my own country after 3.5 decades in Japan. The fourth segment is status of Japan's assistance to Nepal in recent past and high-level exchange. Japan suspended ODA for Nepal from 2001 for 12 years and resumed it in 2013 after great diplomatic persuasion. The resumption of ODA led to agreements on some core projects like Tanu Hydroelectric Project, Tirubhuvan International Airport Instrumentation Renovation and Modernization Project, and Nagdunga Tunnel to ease traffic to and from Kathmandu Valley. The devastating earthquake that rocked on April 25, 2015 was a real tragic event in Nepal. Japan was spontaneous in supporting us in terms of relief and rescue operations. It dispatched teams associated with special disaster relief, Japan Self-Defense Force, and 2 special medical corps with 300 highly trained personnel and representative Red Cross and other philanthropic organizations within 24 hours of disaster. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe made a special provision for emergency supply of essential materials and medicines, along with the Special Emergency Disaster Support Fund, in addition to Japan's support to international agencies working for Nepal's relief and rescue operations. Immediately after the great disaster in terms of both human and material losses, the government of Japan, through Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Taro Aso, offered to host the international conference for Nepal's reconstruction at the 48th annual meeting of the ADB held in Baku, Azerbaijan from May 2nd to 5th, 2015. Minister of State for Foreign Affairs Minoru Kiuchi and senior officials came to Nepal to pledge substantive assistance over 32 billion Japanese yen for reconstruction efforts. Minister Kiuchi in his speech made a special mention of record collections of private funds by the Embassy of Nepal in the aftermath of disaster. The Embassy of Nepal collected contributions of more than 640 million Japanese yen for the Prime Minister Disaster Relief Fund. It also pursued a top-selling textile unit to donate clothes for 100,000 Mexican people. A briefing to press with a joint briefing to press with Junko Tabei helped collect 4 billion yen for the reconstruction of buildings, schools, and colleges through UNICEF. Likewise, another joint encounter with press along with Sagarmatha Hero and Old Food Program Goodwill Ambassador for Nepal, Yuichiro Miura, faced 7 billion in 12 under WFP people severely affected by earthquake. It is estimated that at least 25 billion yen worth of private funds were received from Japan alone through the NGOs and private channels. President Vidyadevi Bhandari paid official visit to Japan to take part in the enthronement ceremony of His Imperial Majesty Naruhito on October 22nd, 2019, following the accession to the throne on May 1st that year at the start of the Reiwa era, after decision of Emperor Heisei to abdicate on April 30th, 2019. President Dr. Ramban Yadav went to Japan for medical checkup in 2013. Other high-level visits included King Mahendra in 1960 and 70, King Virendra 1967, 78, 83, and 85, King Gyanendra 1975, 1986, and 1989, Crown Prince Dipendra 1990 and 2001, and Crown Prince Parak 2005. Prime Ministers Tankaprasad Acharya and Girija Prasad Koirala paid official visits to Japan 1956 and 1998 respectively. From the Japanese side, Emperor Heisei visited Nepal in 1960 and 1975. Emperor Naruhito was here in 1987, while Crown Prince Akishiro came in 1997. Prime Minister Yoshiro Mori made an official visit in 2000. The fifth segment of our presentation is sisterly relations. We signed a sisterly collaboration agreement between two UNESCO heritage sites, Lumini and Koyasan, on September 20th, 2015. The agreement was negotiated to coincide with special program of Koyasan town, headquarters of Shingon Buddhism, propounded by Kobo Taisi Kukai, to mark the 1200th anniversary of the founding of the city, attracting a large number of tourists. Secretary-General ruling Ziminto and Chairman of Japan-Nepal Parliamentary Friendship League, Toshihiro Nikai, was especially present during the signing ceremony. The new agreement brings the number of Nepali entities to sign sisterly agreement with Japan to 4. 3 other agreements relate to Kathmandu Matsumoto 1989, Tukuchi Toga 1989, and Pokhara Komagane 2001. The sixth and the last segment of presentation is status of Nepali diaspora. Another powerful strand of Nepal-Japan relations is the presence of vocal and active Nepali diaspora, growing exponentially in recent years from a paltry number of 35 in 1978. The number jumped more than threefold within 4 years of our stay there from 2011 to 2015. Figures released by the Immigration Control Bureau of Japan as of December 31st, 2020 are most revealing in the sense that they convey our quite substantive people-to-people relations. Out of almost 3 million foreigners, with Asians accounting almost 84% in Japan, the number of Nepalis is 97,966, keeping us in the 6th position among foreigners behind China, Republic of Korea, Vietnam, the Philippines, and Brazil. Japan is possibly the only country in the world where we beat all SAARC countries individually and almost square up collectively. In terms of SAARC population, the total figures as are available indicate that the total number is 203,250, making Nepalis a staggeringly high percentage of 48.2%. Long live Nepal-Japan ties of friendship and cooperation. Dhanyabad, arigato gozaimasu. Again, for the Japanese viewers, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Madan Bhattarai, for your insight presentation, former Secretary of Nepal. I thank all our fantastic speaker for their insight, remarks, and presentation. We are really running out of time, but I'm queued with a lot of questions. And as a journalist inside me won't despair if I don't raise some question to our speakers. I have a question for Ambassador Chandra Acharya. So as your wide experience in multilateral diplomacy, you just mentioned in your presentation that Nepal should seek more visibility, branding, and we should promote ourselves. So how can we do that? How can we establish a good branding for our nation? I would like to ask this question to Ambassador Chandra Acharya, and I'm seeking very short answers, I guess, due to time constraint.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Shamaji. Thank you for that question. Before taking up that question, I think 2 comments I would like to make, which was made by the previous speakers. One was about, briefly, just 1 minute, because I know that there is a time constraint. One was by the Professor Anjoo Upadhyaya. I think, we do understand that you have talked about your relationship with Nepal through the Dangadi. and the reference to the Hungary and all of that. I think there was also a relation, the issue about the relationship with different countries around the world, but we have to follow the Westphalian model that we really, the state-to-state relations are very important. Therefore, our relationship with China, and our relationship with India, all of that are very important. The two are not comparable, and each has its own dynamics and each has its own history of relationships. So that's one point that I would like to say. The second point that I would like to also mention was about Professor Zhang. I think there are two things. One, I also agree with you in the sense that our policies should be pro-Nepal, and that is precisely what we should be doing all the time. That is what we are also saying. But I do not agree with that, with your view that the ODA is looting. I think that is a very strong statement. And then we have been having a relationship with many countries around the world. And based on our experiences, that we have been able to make a lot of progress, thanks to the support that we have been receiving, not only from the countries in the neighborhood, but beyond that. Therefore, we don't see that as a looting. So that's two comments that I would really like to make. And the third point is about your question about how to really enhance our standing at the international level. Well, when we talk about international, the standing, naturally, very strong lobby for promotion of multilateralism is very important. The primacy of the multilateral principles in the conduct of international relationships would be very important. And of course, our contribution to the UN peacekeeping is another example of that. Our leadership role in the United Nations on many of the issues, including the development issues, whether it is about the least developed countries or having a very strong, the legal basis and the practical cooperation for promoting the transit relationship is also equally very important for us. And thirdly, again, when you look at the global challenges, whether it is the climate change, the pandemic, or the the other challenges that will come around the world in order to really deal with our poverty-related challenges, international solidarity and global cooperation will be very important. But for them to do that, I think we also have to project that what we have been doing is the best of our ability, that we are trying to do our best. We really like to seek international support to strengthen our contributing to the international peace and stability.
Thank you, Ambassador Acharya. Now I have a question for Dr. Dinesh Bhattarai. I'm reading some questions from chat box. One of the question says, many nations joined BRI earlier, but owing to threats to national sovereignty, they pulled out later. How has Nepal responded to these possible threats to Nepal's sovereignty by BRI and increasing Chinese influence in Nepal's domestic politics? Would that lead to Nepal also pulling out of the BRI, fearing debt trap like in Sri Lanka? This question is for Dr. Dinesh Bhattarai.
Thank you, Samaji. I would not repeat what my predecessor has said, and I was feeling about that also. Well, I do not speak for other countries, why they have pulled out of BRI. As for Nepal, I think non-implementation of agreed projects raises confusion. 9 projects were identified under BRI and not a single project has proceeded. That raises confusion. And why other countries pulled out of BRI, I do not comment. I speak for myself, like for Nepal. Whatever we agree, it has to go. It has to be implemented. So what we will do is that, as I said in my presentation, whatever component is beneficial to our interest, to Nepal, we'll take that. And we should have the guts to say that, well, this is not beneficial to us, this is not aligned to our national interest, this is not aligned to our national priority, we can say no. Now, we should have that courage. But having said that, I would say Nepal's engagement with our neighbors need to be effectively, strategically, and systematically oriented. At the moment, you know, we agree and we leave all those projects lying unimplemented. So I think consistency is a must for credibility and trust between nations. So I wish that those agreed projects are put into implementation and we start benefiting from them. I think that is the question that you put to me, and because of the time constraint, I will stop here. If you have any additional queries, then let me know.
Thank you. I appreciate your effort, Dr. Dinesh Bhattarai. I have a question here for Mr. Zhang. As you've mentioned, China's rise is inevitable in your presentation. There's a question for you. But other Asian nations can make choice between their development partners, whether China or the US or Europe. Why does China consider partnerships between Western and other Asian powers as a threat? This question is addressed to Professor Zhang.
You're muted. You're muted, Professor Zhang.
Yes, I think
he will have to unmute himself, I suppose.
Professor Zhang, can you unmute yourself? I think you're muted.
And I'd like to take 2 minutes once he's done.
Oh, I'm sorry. First, I would like to make it clear that in my presentation, I did not say China's rise is not available. Okay, if my memory is correct, it should be Ambassador Dinesh Bhattarai's presentation. He mentioned China's rise is inevitable. I don't think China's rise cannot prevent it. Now, the American, the European countries, the G7, they are joining together to prevent China from rising. Okay. Now, for BRI projects, if any country thinks it's not good for them, they can just reject it. No, never accept anything you don't like. That is my opinion about the BRI cooperation. Now, so many friends in Nepal think that BRI is Chinese government's donation. It's not donation. It's a win-win cooperation. It's not everything free, okay? Now, if you just want, let's take the China-Nepal Railway, for example. It is very difficult to construct, and it will cost a lot of money. Many Nepali political leaders, many Nepali friends say it should be built by Chinese grant. How can it come true? If you only want something, anything is free from charge, it can never be realized. That is what I said, response to the friends in Nepal. Okay, my suggestion is China and Nepal can jointly set up a multinational cooperation. Let's name it China-Nepal Railway Corporation or something like that. Okay, and try to attract all the international investors, including the Indian, the American, the European, and so on. Okay. Now, if we can benefit from the railway, okay, all of us can make some money. If we lose, all are losing. Okay. In this way, we can, reduce the Indians, the Americans' prevention from the building of the China railway station, China-Nepal railway, to the minimum degree. That is what I think about BRI cooperation between China and other countries. Never think that China's BRI is a donation. Never think BRI is a debt trap. Now, so many people say BRI is a debt trap. Take Sri Lanka as an example. Actually, Sri Lanka's debt mainly are borrowed from the Western countries. In all the debts Sri Lanka borrowed from the other countries, China covers no more than 1%. Mostly, they borrow the money from the other countries, especially the Western countries. Now, you can do research about the BRI projects in Sri Lanka. Okay, that is my explanation. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Zhang Shubin, for addressing the query. Now, I have a question for Professor Dr. Anjoo Upadhyaya. How do you see India-Nepal relation in the coming years? This question is for Dr. Anjoo Upadhyaya.
Thank you very much. Before I respond to that, I would like to address Ambassador Acharya's observation on my presentation. The reason I went back to my childhood and Dhangari and Lakhimpur was not to say that things will remain to be what they were some 60 plus years ago. I just wanted to highlight my connectivity with this beautiful country right from my childhood. And no academic in their proper senses would be constructing that things in international politics will remain where they were 70 years ago or 80 years ago. Things always, they're constantly in a flux, and I'm sure Nepalis would know it much better than we do. I myself mentioned that 2015 was probably a turning point between India-Nepal relations, not so much because India's omissions during the earthquake, but much more than what was in India looked upon as a very hurried conclusion of a constitution that was kind of, affecting people from a region of Nepal itself. And there, this, as India officially puts it, and we're maintaining it, was much to do with the response of Nepalese themselves. I did allure to the challenge of what could be mentioned as either patriotism or nationalism, whatever you call, that Nepal needs to address the division within the country. Nepal needs to address the discrimination that you can easily see between, between the topi and the dhoti. Nepal needs to address the diversities that are very much inherent in their system. So this was my response to what, you were probably alluring that I wanted things to remain where they were. A child's vision is definitely different from what a trained academic's vision would be. My response to your question, to somebody's question here, how do we visualize India-Nepal relations in future? India and Nepal both have been harping upon what we say, very ancient cultural connectivity, and with all due regards to the feminists in the world, to the roti-beti relationship and what have you. However, one feels that in the entire South Asia, there is a sharing. For instance, when you go down south, you realize that you cannot really differentiate a neighborhood in Sri Lanka with a neighborhood in Tamil Nadu. You go to West Bengal, you cannot differentiate between a neighborhood in Dhaka and a neighborhood of Kolkata. And for that matter, even between what is a shared culture between India and Pakistan. We enjoy the same cuisine, perhaps much better than what we do with Nepal. We enjoy the same music. We enjoy the same attire, the same jewelry. What actually makes these differences of relationships are the political arrangements. And it is this political arrangement with Nepal that has worked to enrich this connectivity. And if that gets affected, due to whatever reason, some political parties in Nepal kept on building their nationalism on the basis of, on the basis of Hate India campaign. And that is something that is likely to damage the relationship in a very, very serious way. I just concluded, a student of mine concluded a PhD on Indo-Nepal relations with particular reference to the 1950 treaty. She went on to interview more than, I think, 1,000 respondents, half of them from India and half of them from Nepal. And I was shocked to see that most of the respondents from India were stating that there has to be a reciprocity. So that is where, when the political relationship can actually prosper. India respects Nepalese independence. India is, is in great admiration of Nepali, what we say, Samman. And I personally have always meant that it is in Nepal that India meets China. It's in Nepal that India meets Pakistan. So there is, India herself gets enriched by this connectivity, and all profits can never be counted in terms of financial gains or in trade relations or in all those tangible assets. And India is very proud of a dynamic relationship that Nepal has. I mentioned about India's, delayed, India's delayed, the implementation of the projects in India. And one is very happy that, yes, they're speeding up, not only vis-a-vis Nepal, but also vis-a-vis Bangladesh. And there are phases in a country's life when certain things happen on ground, and then certain things remain to be, procrastinated. And finally, I would like to make an observation that, like individuals, same is true of nations, that fondness grows through fondness. It can never be a one-way traffic. It can never be a one person hates the other person and the other person is loving the other person. And same is true of nations. And each one of us will have to keep on working towards that. And each one of us will have to commit ourselves to ensure the promotion of good relationships to each other. Thank you. Thank you, Samaji.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Anjoo Sharan Upadhyaya. I have a question here for Mr. Madan Bhattarai. Okay. Yes, it's for Madan Bhattarai. How Nepal's foreign policy been shaped by external dynamics of engagement in the context of COVID-19 or any change? So this question goes to Madan Bhattarai, former Secretary of Nepal.
Thank you very much, Madam. You see, this COVID-19 and its effect has brought out a tremendous impact, not only in Nepal, but also in other parts of the world. The first thing is that, you see, we should try to just fix our priorities, whether we are going to get vaccines or whether we are going to get it from this country or that country, and what we are going to do. You see, that is the first thing is that we have to fix our priorities. The second thing is that we should try to use the proper channels, say Ministry of Foreign Affairs or the Ministry of Health, and then try to get it. You see, but what I feel is that given our long experience in dealing with the neighbors, given our long experience in dealing with foreign policy, because we have the oldest foreign office in this part of the world, I'm sure that we'll be able to get it. But right now, things are not that much optimistic. That is my observation. And at the same time, I would like to thank you, the most charismatic moderator, for navigating this most important interactions to such a successful conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you for that humble compliment. I think I'll take it as a compliment. Thank you very much. I have one very interesting question from Ayusri. Ayusri is a student, and this question goes to Ambassador Acharya. I find it very interesting. So there have been controversies on effective mechanism of Nepal's foreign policies with a more populist approach and not through the principles. How do you think the country will be able to sustain the geopolitical objectives and strategies with current political instability and crisis? This question goes to Ambassador Acharya.
Very much. I think this is a very important question. I think when you look at the foreign policy principles, we all agree, but when it comes to the practice, it is always very difficult for the country like Nepal to really ensure that there is a fairness, there is a balance, and there is a constructive and the beneficial engagement with all. But I must say once again that I think the key issue here for all of us is to ensure that when you look at the programs and projects and interactions with any countries around the world, but especially with the neighbors and the major powers, I think we should always think about how does it really enhances Nepal's progress, it strengthens its independent views, and also its dignity. I think these are very important issues to really keep in mind. Second, in terms of the engagement, as I said earlier as well, maintaining multi-layered but also diverse engagement is key to the smaller countries, because it is very important for a strategically located country like Nepal to ensure that there is a increased freedom of choice. There is also the engagement with all to get due benefit in our relationship, a balanced, constructive, and beneficial engagement with all. And then, of course, avoidance of taking sides and aligning with one or the other. I think those are some of the issues that we should try to really put it into practice. That is what I would say. And naturally, the instability of a country will have negative implications on foreign policy, on economic progress in the country, on stability of the country itself. I think this is fundamentally that we have seen. If you look at the Nepal's, even the economic growth and other activities during the time of conflict in Nepal, we see that we were performing much below our potentials. And that's why it is very important for us that we have the political stability, but we also have a very consistent, trustworthy, and dynamic engagement with all the major players, but it's starting from the neighborhood in a more thoughtful way, in a more longer term perspective than the short term perspective. I would say that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Acharya. I think we are running out of time. I thank all our 4 fabulous panelists for their excellent remarks and insight knowledge on Nepal's foreign policy. And I'd also like to thank NIICE family for hosting this mega event, because a great event, a mega event like this cannot happen overnight. It requires a lot of follow-up, logistic management. I really, really thank NIICE family for organizing this great event. And I'm also hoping for a physical event like this in the days to come. What about a physical event in the premises of Hindu Banaras University in the days to come? That would be a cherry on the cake.
You're very welcome, Samaji. I must tell you that way back in 2011, the Nepal Center of BHU wanted to organize a conference on federalism in Nepal. And we wanted to invite experts from Nepal, and they all said, we are way too busy making the new constitution. If you want to have a seminar, come to Kathmandu, and then we will have a seminar. So we all went to Kathmandu and organized that seminar in Annapurna Hotel instead of organizing.
Will also be fine. Thank you, all of you. Thank you.
I think, thank you very much. Thank you for organizing.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for organizing.
Does the Center for the Study of Nepal continue?
Yes, it does, sir. It does.
It does. Okay.
You're very welcome to visit.
That's good to hear.
Yes,
so we should have one in Nepal and one in BHU there.
We used to have it. Actually, when I was director of the Nepal Center, we used to have one in BHU and the other in Nepal, and our partner was Tribhuvan University. So we should have it. We should reward it again. And Dilli Raman Regmi had, announced an award of 5,000 for young best paper. So we had matched it also. That one person from India, one from Nepal will be given this award. And the Indian money came from India and the Nepali money came. It was small money, but it was good for the certificate. And I'm happy that all the recipients today have become teachers in universities or colleges. So. And thank you very much to NIICE Nepal, and we all enjoyed seeing each other and participating in this event, and look forward to more.
Thank you. I thank all of you for your gracious presence.
Thank you very much.
Really, really wonderful meeting all of you, even in virtual medium.
Arigato gozaimasu. Thank you.
Arigato gozaimasu.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, sir, for joining us today, for separating time from your busy schedule to be a part of this event. Thank you so much, ma'am. We are very, very, very grateful to you. Nimish, would you like to take it forward? Nimesh?
Yes, Mahi, yes.
Yes.
Distinguished Chair, speakers, ladies and gentlemen, as we have come to the end of this session, we would like to express our sincere gratitude and thanks to the Chair for agreeing to chair and moderate the session today. Our sincere thanks also goes to all the speakers for being a part of the event and delivering such comprehensive and convincing presentations. We would like to acknowledge our gratitude to our friends from the diplomatic community, experts, academia, media, and different organizations. Finally, we must also mention our deep sense of appreciation for the audience who participated in the webinar and those who are watching us live. Thank you for your valuable time and attention and for making this session productive with your questions. Once again, we are truly honored to have you all with us today. Please do join us in the next session. Thank you so much.